Welcome everyone to the 100th edition of Primo Nutmeg. Tonight's guest is the most dangerous man in the world, Ken Shamrock. Ladies and gentlemen, you will not want to miss this interview. He talks about his entire career, his feud with Royce Gracie, and even gives his 2 cents on the Mayweather-McGregor fight. So please do stay tuned. And while you're listening, remember to subscribe to Primo Nutmeg on YouTube, SoundCloud, and iTunes. Enjoy the show. Ken Shamrock, welcome to Primo Nutmeg.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, and I'm really happy because this is our 100th episode, so I really do appreciate you being on. It is a really big thing, being a fan of yours for so many years, so do appreciate your time. So if we could, I really just wanted to walk through your career a little bit. And the first question, I'm sure you get asked this a lot, but what got you originally involved in mixed martial arts as a sport?
Well, I was actually doing pro wrestling. I was working for Nelson Royal. I was in the East Coast working out of South Atlantic Pro Wrestling, North Atlantic Pro Wrestling, and Dean Malenko was traveling with me, and we were working on a circuit together, and he actually had this videotape, and it showed me these 2 guys, which at the time was Masakatsu Funaki and Minoru Suzuki. I watched these 2 guys fight on this tape, and of course, back in them days, you never saw anything where you saw 2 guys pretty much kickboxing with each other, and then when they went to the ground, they clinched, they went to the ground, they started doing these locks and these different positions and submission holds and stuff. And I remember watching the tape, and I was just like, man, now that right there, I knew right away. I said that's the ultimate right there in fighting. I mean, that was it. And so once I saw that, I had talked to Dean and said, dude, man, you got to get me hooked up with this. And so he introduced me to Sammy Saranaka, and Sammy pretty much introduced me, put me through some training stuff, and then brought me over to Japan, put me through some training there, and, never looked back after.
Dean Malenko is known as the man of 1,000 holds in pro wrestling. Did you learn any practical fighting skills from working with him?
Well, I mean, he never actually worked with me personally, but I know, firsthand that a lot of the stuff that he implemented, and his brother too, implemented into pro wrestling they were shootables. So, I mean, those guys were legitimate shooters. If they had to, they could.
So when did you first hear about the first UFC event?
Oh, I couldn't tell you the exact day. I just know that I've been over in Japan for a while. I was the actual champion at the time. And I saw a flyer that one of my students had brought to me, and it said, no holds barred, anything goes. But, I mean, I saw it, and it just reminded me of a Hulk Hogan type thing, where,
right.
It's a no holds barred in the cage match. And so I just kind of blew it off. And then I remember my student said, no, man, these are mixed martial arts guys that are actually going in there and fighting with one another. And I was like, I was like in disbelief, because I was like, there's no way they're going to let guys go in there and punch each other bare-fisted with no rules. I said, it's just not going to happen. I mean, this is the United States, not a third world country.
So did you agree to it thinking that it wasn't actually going to take place?
Oh, absolutely. I had doubts all the way up until the bell rang, and I watched Gerard Godot kick Emmanuel Tue in the face. That's when I realized that it was really happening.
So, I know that during that event you met Royce Gracie, and he was wearing a gi. Did you take him seriously when you fought him, or did you not take him seriously? Did you think he was just something of a performer? Had you heard of him before that event?
I never heard of him. I watched tapes on him, and he looked pretty skilled, but he didn't seem very dangerous to me. I felt like my submissions were better. I felt like I could do more with him. I felt I would be stronger, in better shape. My submission skills were a much higher caliber of submissions. And so I really thought going into the fight with him that he wasn't really going to be my adversary. I thought that my adversary would be Gerard Godot. I really believed that he would be my toughest opponent in that tournament. And so you know, I overlooked Hoist because I didn't really think anything of the gi and the understanding of the gi, of how it would equalize my strength and give him much more strength using the gi, because without the gi, I crush him because he's not, you know, he's not strong enough. So with the gi, it basically eliminates your power against guys that are less of strength.
You know, something interesting about then when UFC first started is it was a style versus a style. And I know when I talked to Hoist Gracie previously, he really emphasized that. And I just have to ask, because the big fight news right now is that Conor McGregor just agreed to a fight with Floyd Mayweather, a boxing match. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. How do you think that fight is going to turn out?
Well, I mean, I think it's good for the fight world. I mean, it's given people a reason to complain or to be excited. I mean, as long as people are all talking, then you've got something. So, you know, I think it's good for Mayweather. You know, he's got a fight that I think that he can't lose as far as judge-wise, you know, getting his hand raised.
Right.
I think that he has a pretty good chance of winning, you know, and really not having to put too much effort into doing so. I think that it's bad for boxing because it doesn't do anything for them. You know, you're basically taking a guy like Conor McGregor, who's never really been in the boxing, and you're going to throw him in there with the world champion. And if Conor McGregor puts up a fight at all, then boxing's going to look bad because you got one of the best ever stepping in the ring and should dominate him. But that's not Floyd Mayweather's style. He doesn't dominate guys. He basically beats them into submission by hitting them so many times that they just don't know where the next punch is coming from. It's not like it's going to knock him out or anything like that. It's going to frustrate him. It's going to bruise him up. It's going to get him angry. It's going to get him, you know, confused. And he's going to make him look pretty much off balance the whole time. So I think that it's not good for boxing. I think it's good for Mayweather because he's going to make a lot of money. He doesn't have to put much effort into it. He's going to get a win in his column no matter what. I think it's great for Conor McGregor because he's got nothing to lose and everything to gain. I think it's good for the UFC because it's drawn a much bigger spectator from boxing into the Ultimate Fighting Championship or the No Holds Barred or the MMA world. So really, it really doesn't make sense to me of why they would put the reputation of boxing on the line with nothing to gain.
And, you know, that's something Bill Burr was actually recently joking about. He was saying, you know, if Conor McGregor does win, that is, he was joking when he said, but that's the death of boxing, because how do you come back from that, having your greatest fighter lose to the greatest UFC fighter? But, you know, you also transcended these different industries. You both fought in the UFC, and then from there you went to what was then known as the World Wrestling Federation, now known as WWE. When were you approached by WWE to come be a professional wrestler from them, from the UFC?
Well, let me back up a little bit, and then you can ask me that question again. But I want to go back to the statement that you made of Conor McGregor being the greatest UFC fighter. But I think that's a little premature. I mean, I think Conor McGregor is a great fighter, and I think he's the best in his weight division right now. And I think arguably he's definitely a Hall of Famer ballot, no question. But he got knocked out by Diaz. Right. So
that was a great fight, by the way.
Absolutely, it was. But listen, and Andy, of course, he went up weight. So I mean, but listen, we're talking about Floyd Money Mayweather, the greatest ever, and it speaks for itself by his record. Whether you like him or you hate him, doesn't matter. He's undefeated. That doesn't happen in boxing. He's undefeated. He's the best, right? Mm-hmm. So you look at that, and you look at putting a guy like McGregor, who's, you know, there's people can have arguments about whether or not he's the greatest or not. I mean, there's an argument there because he lost. So there's an argument there. There's no argument about Floyd Mayweather. He's undefeated. So you got a guy that's probably, you know, going to be in the Hall of Fame ballot, you know, UFC guy, up there with some of the greatest, not the greatest, but up there with some of the greatest. And he's going to fight a guy that is the greatest in boxing. And And if he doesn't knock out Conor McGregor in the first 5 rounds or the first half of the fight, then boxing loses. They can't win this. And that's why it doesn't make any sense to me of why
So you're saying
boxing would allow it to happen.
Even if McGregor loses, boxing still loses too? Potentially.
The only way McGregor loses is if he gets knocked down in the first couple rounds. Then it's not even like he really loses. It just brings up boxing higher. But,
right.
It's not like it's the end of him. But if he goes the distance or he goes deep into the fight and puts on a good fight, boxing is going to be hard to recover from that. Because you've got the greatest boxer of all time in Floyd Money Mayweather.
It's a fair point. Can't really argue with that. Well, Ken, I know there are times really limited. I really would like to ask you about your wrestling career as well. When were you approached by, was it Vince McMahon, or who contacted you originally to get involved with the WWF?
Well, I had to jump around through some hoops and try to find some people that could get me hooked up because, when I left No Holds Barred, I left because I couldn't make enough money to support my family. And so I had to figure out other means to be able to make that money. And so I searched around, and it looked like World Wrestling Federation. I looked at a lot of places, but as soon as I contacted them, I got immediately contacted back by Vince McMahon himself and showed much interest in bringing me in. So there's really no choice or no thought to me when Vince reached out. He immediately was aggressively coming after me when I actually made the call. And so I'm glad, too, because I don't think I would have been able to have the career I would have had if I hadn't gone into the World Wrestling Federation, because I think I don't think they used me the way they could have and should have. You got imitations that they put over, like Goldberg. Stone Cold Steve Austin's a great talent. But there was just so many different ways they could have used the real deal of a no-holds-barred fighter instead of using guys like Goldberg, and I love those guys. But they had the real deal sitting in front of them, and I just didn't think that it was used properly, in my opinion.
Right. You were Intercontinental Champion, and you were Tag Team Champion as well. But I think, if they had someone like yourself coming from Ultimate Fighting into WWF and winning the title, winning the WWF title, I think that might have made a lot more sense, or maybe even been a little more hype for that period. I have to ask you too, which wrestlers in particular did you like working with back then? I know you had a big match against The Rock. I know you worked with Vader as well. Were there any particular performers that you really liked to work with in the ring?
Yeah, I really, like I said, there was a lot of good hands there, and just to be in the ring with them, you could tell that they were definitely special. And, I always tried to think of myself as being a great talent, and that I pick things up fast, and that, I want to be as good as everybody else. But when I walked in the ring and I worked against some of these guys like Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret Hart. I mean, the list could go on with these guys that had been there a while that were truly, truly superstars. I knew that there was greatness. I was in the ring with greatness. So I had a really, really awesome and a blessed opportunity when I walked into the World Wrestling Federation, and being able to work with those guys when I was so raw in talent, and being able to learn from those guys, man, it was special.
So after that, you did come back to the UFC. You had that feud with Tito Ortiz, and you had a couple other fights as well. What are your thoughts retrospectively, looking back to that second run that you had in the UFC?
Well, for me, I think it was about me challenging myself. I know a lot of people, and I get it. I feel how they feel. They see a guy they followed so much, and it hurts people to see somebody that they have looked up to and that have admired and followed, and basically a hero, go out there and not be able to perform the way that they're used to seeing him perform. And then I still look good, so it wasn't like I looked like I couldn't perform. I still looked like I could go, so it was even harder for people to digest that. But I think that the thing that I want people to realize from that time was, that's how my life was. That's how I was able to become successful, is because I never would let anybody knock me down. And if they did, I wouldn't stay there. I would keep finding ways to succeed. And I'd never not been in a position to where I was knocked down or beat up or something bad had happened in my life, a broken neck or a broken back or anything, financial crush coming down financially, hitting the bottom. And I always kept fighting back, and I found ways to succeed. And I've always done that. And then when it came to that part of my life where things were slowing down, you know, I wasn't moving as fast. I wasn't as clean as I used to be when it came to my submission skills, my striking skills. Everything was slowing down, and I kept fighting harder and harder to overcome that. And it's like telling somebody who has never known the word quit or give up or stop, telling them to do so, and then they're going to look at you and go, well, what does it mean? How do you do it? And that's kind of where I was at. I was in the middle of trying to find a way to defeat Father Time, to be able to continue to keep finding ways to keep winning and pushing back Father Time. And as we all know, Father Time was undefeated. But I didn't know that's the battle I was in. I just believed I could win and I could find a way to succeed through those times. And, you know, unfortunately, it didn't happen. But like I said, when people kept saying you should retire, you should stop, you should do this, you should do that, I just couldn't see doing that on failure. I needed to succeed and go out on my terms.
Well, since then, you've also signed with Bellator. You had some big fights with Bellator. And, you know, I had Royce Gracie on this show previously, and I asked him about that fight. And, you know, he kind of, to be honest, he sounded like a broken record. I kept kind of asking him how he felt about it, and he said, you know, it went according to plan. It went according to plan. I really would like just to ask you personally, what are your thoughts just about the whole experience of signing that fight, you know, agreeing to it, doing it? And, I mean, do you still want a rematch? Do you think that's something that you would like to happen still?
I have always been pretty smart in setting things up, especially as I got older. I started making sure that the fights that I were getting were fights fans wanted to see and fights that I wanted. And not getting over my head. You know, the only time I ever took any fights where I knew I was in over my head, but it was good for the business, was when I came back to fight Tito Ortiz because the UFC was dying. They asked me to come back, try to help build the company back up. And I did that. Even though I was, you know, in my early 40s, Tito was in his prime, I was definitely, you know, I had a big disadvantage going in there. But I did it. And but after that, I made sure all the fights that I did were fun. They weren't going to be putting me in danger at anything like that. And I would set up the ones that I think that the fans wanted to see. Now, going into those last two fights, I had exactly set up that I was going to do two more fights. That was with Kimbo, and that was going to be with Royce. And I was going to go out with wins, and I believed there was no doubt in my mind that I would get those wins. And I went and I fought, you know, Kimbo, and, you know, people say or do whatever they want to do, but, you know, he tapped, and in my opinion, I let him go. And he even tells you in the meeting that I let him go. Well, that's because he tapped. Anyway, spilt milk under the bridge, no problem. Let's move on. So I want Royce Gracie now. Let that go. It's done. Let's just finish on a good note. So I go in there, and I get Royce Gracie, and there's really no doubt in my mind that I'm going to squash him. And the game plan was just to go in there, make him move around, because we know he's going to be hyper, because he's going to be afraid. There's no question. And he's going to be all over the ring until he slows down. And once he slows down, then we'll unload on him. We're going to keep him on his feet, and we're going to beat him up. And that's the way the fight went. And then as soon as he started to slow down and we clinched, he hit me with a low shot. And in my opinion, we're all professionals here. We're responsible for the punches and the kicks and knees that we throw. We are professionals, and we know and we should have the best of abilities to be able to land those somewhere close to the target. And that was way off target, and in my opinion, intentional. because he realized that he was not going to have the fight go where he wanted to go, and that was going to be on the ground. He was going to have to stand up, and he was going to get beat up. And so he threw the low blow, knowing that if the referee saw it, he might get disqualified. Instead, the referee don't see it, and he gets his hand raised. And then, in my opinion, instead of being a professional fighter and say, yeah, my bad, sorry, let's do it again, he says, hey, man, you should have known that's the way we used to fight. Wow.
Well, I do have to ask
and
you.
To answer your question, do I want to fight him again? Hell yes.
Awesome.
Hell yes. And it's a damn shame that they're going to allow this to go in the history books like that.
I agree. And speaking as a fan, I would love to see you guys fight again. Is there anybody besides Royce that you would like to fight who maybe, any up and comers or anybody that you think you have unfinished business with? Anybody specifically who you would like to fight again?
I'm 53 years old, man, and it is a task to be able to go and train every day and get prepared to go into a fight with all the scar tissues and different injuries that I've had along the way. And it's a tough deal to do that. I would do that for Royce Gracie, but I am no way going to get in the ring with an up-and-comer or somebody that may sound good to fight. It's got to make sense, and it's got to have a reason for it. People got to want it, and it's got to be something that has to have a reason to it. It's got to be something that is going to be a rubber match or something that's old business. Then yeah, there's something I would be interested in, but it's got to make sense.
Would you ever consider wrestling again? Maybe having a big match with Brock Lesnar at a SummerSlam or WrestleMania?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's something I would love to do. I think that Brock Lesnar, with his type of style, of just big muscles, slow moving, power type stuff, that I could really work a great match with him.
Well, Ken Shamrock, I really do appreciate your time this evening. I know that you do have to run, but for folks who are interested in staying up to date with you, are there any social media outlets or websites where they can do that?
Yeah, I have KenShamrock.com. I have Instagram. I have Twitter. I have Facebook. You name it, I got it on there. It's all attached to my website. And we've always got new and up-and-coming things that we're doing. We got a comic book deal that's coming through, so you want to go on there and check that out. We have the first couple pages coming out. So it's some exciting stuff on my website, new stuff that I'm going to be involved with and doing. So if you want to keep up on Ken Shamrock, follow all the new things that we're doing, go to KenShamrock.com. I'm on there. I'm always active with my fans, so I'd love to talk to you.
Well, Ken Shamrock, the most dangerous man in the world, thank you very much for being on the 100th episode of Primo Nutmeg. It really does mean a lot to me, and if possible, I'd love to have you back in the future as well.
Hey, I'd love to, especially after we launch a few of these things we've got going on. I'd love to talk about it.
Absolutely. Thank you again, sir. I really do appreciate your time.
Appreciate it. God bless.
Thank you, everybody, once again for listening to this special 100th edition of the Primo Nutmeg podcast. Once again, if you did enjoy this show, please support us by subscribing on YouTube, SoundCloud, and iTunes. Also, check out our new website, primonutmeg.com. There you'll see links to previous episodes of the show featuring Royce Gracie, Jake the Snake Roberts, Bob Backlund, and many, many other interesting people. Thanks again for listening, folks. And this is Steve saying, until next time.